Right, greetings and welcome. We're doing another VillageSoup interview today, and with me here in the studio, I'm Dan Dunkel. I'm the news director for VillageSoup, and with me here today is Chris Whytock, and you're the fire chief and EMS director for the town of Rockland, or I guess the city of Rockland, I should say. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So the big question I had to ask you about is that recently you and some other officials from Rockland visited with the Camden Selectmen, and you were talking about a regional ambulance service for some of the multiple towns in Knox County. Can you tell us a little bit about this possibility and basically how this may manifest itself?
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, it's obviously early in the talks, but I think probably 8-9 months ago, Camden came to Rockland and just said, hey, we're thinking about possibility of doing something different with our EMS coverage. Is the city able to step in and help, and what could you provide? So that's how the talk started, and we were invited last month to speak with the Camden Select Board, and again just to visit and see if the talks needed to continue, if it was something of interest to the towns, and Camden has agreed to at least keep the talks going to see what could transpire from those. But the basic idea is that right now Camden, Rockport, Hope, and Lincolnville are all covered by a contract through Northeast Ambulance or our Northeast Mobile Health Services, and they were curious if we could provide them with strictly 911 coverage. So somebody calls 911, they need an ambulance, we show up. Right now, the contract that Northeast has with them, they do 911 coverage, but they also do transfer services, from hospital to hospital, nursing home to hospital, that type of thing. And it's a different model, a different operation, and so they were curious what the differences were, and then really what we could offer to essentially keep the ambulances in town. So instead of transporting somebody from Penn Bay Medical Center to Main Med and taking that ambulance out of service for multiple hours, they were more focused and more interested on keeping the ambulances in town for 911 calls only.
So is the idea that this would replace what they have now, or augment it, or?
Well, and again, we've got a few different options of what could happen, but the idea, at least from the city's standpoint, is that we only do 911 calls, we only do emergency calls to the hospital. We don't take people in a facility. And that would be the big change, I think, if the city came in to help them out. It would be just the strictly 911 calls, and then you have to look at, does Northeast stick around with some ambulances to do the transfers that are needed up here through the hospital. And I think that's where we're at in the talks now, is what we can provide, but are they still going to be around if this takes place?
And you're already providing services outside of Rockland as well. I mean, there are often calls to Thomaston and maybe even as far as Warren and Rockport and places like that.
Yeah, I mean, and it's all through mutual aid. So the city's contracted with the town of Owl's Head, so we provide them with coverage just like we do in the city. But there are mutual aid calls that happen, and because we're a staff station, we have trained people. We're trained, to the paramedic level, so that entices other communities that run on a volunteer system, to call us if, one, they can't get a crew, or if, two, they need more of an advanced level of training than what they have. So we work within that scope. We'll go anywhere we're called. We don't go cover Warren all that often, but it would definitely Thomaston, Cushing, every once in a while, St. George or South Thomaston, and then we do back up Northeast Ambulance when their trucks are busy. So
if you ended up with official agreements with, like, say, a Camden, Rockport, or Lincolnville, this area, would that mean that you would expand your staff to deal with extra coverage? Because you wouldn't want to leave Rockland unattended while you were outside the city.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, the whole scope of this is based on the fact that what we currently have in the city stays in the city. It will allow us to move ambulances around if the north end of the county is busy and we need to back them up. But it definitely is going to be an increase in staff, an increase in apparatus, which inherently is going to cost money. And I think that's coming into this, if people realize that, you know, they're getting a service out of their current contracting obligations, and they're getting a service that they're contracted for. But they, you know, our services will be more expensive because we'll have dedicated people and dedicated apparatus there 24/7. So it will increase our staff. It will increase our call volume, obviously. So we need to be able to absorb that without affecting what the city has right now. So.
Now, how far do you go? If there was like a major disaster, say in Washington or something like that, would you actually send crew that far?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have county agreements through either the EMA office or through the departments individually that allow us to go essentially wherever we're called. If there was a large plane crash or some big disaster somewhere in other parts of the state, and the state was looking for additional help, we have that ability to go, and vice versa. I mean, we have the ability to call more people in outside of the county, really throughout the state. So.
What would you say is the response time right now in Rockland?
So we're looking at statistics. At the beginning of every year, we kind of look at what we've done the previous year and see if there's the abilities to, increase or decrease our response times, increase staffing and stuff like that. So I think for 2018, we were just somewhere in the ballpark of 4 minutes and 40 seconds, 50 seconds, somewhere in there. So, I mean, 3 minutes and 50 seconds. So we're under 4 minutes. We average around 4 minutes within the city. But then it also breaks it down into emergency calls, meaning lights and siren, versus just traveling, regular speed and obeying all the traffic laws.
But so if someone was, having a heart attack and really needed a paramedic right away, you could be there within 4 minutes to give emergency help.
Right, and that's huge because the state average, at least for 2016, the state average is over 10 minutes. So that speaks
and that
volumes.
can count.
Exactly, is seconds count, and I always say that seconds literally can make the difference between life and death. And when we look at our response times, you also have to look at, I mean, there are a whole host of things that change, that response time, being staffing, training, staffing levels and stuff like that. So it's, you can easily give a time, but there's a lot of other factors that go into that. In the city, I always kind of push too that 25% of our calls have another call going on at the same time. So, we're constantly have people moving around and apparatus moving around, and we're a fairly busy organization. So.
Here in the Mid-Coast, a lot of the smaller towns have had a tradition of having an all-volunteer fire department,
Right.
basically unpaid, for many years. How do you see that in today's realities where you guys have to have very specialized training and all that? Is that still a workable way of doing things, or are we going to see a shift over time in these volunteer departments?
Yeah, I think, nationwide, you're already starting to see the shift. And I think that's where towns and cities are going to have to end up if they want certain coverages for certain times. The volunteerism, in every aspect of that realm is, we're seeing a huge drop in numbers. I know when I started in Rockland in '99, our call division, which is something that supplements our full-time staff, so for additional manpower, numerous calls going on, there were 25-ish, and they were quality people. They were trained, they were dedicated, and they would respond when needed. We have since, at one point, we were down to 3 or 4. We're back up to about a dozen right now, which is a really good number. I'm real happy with that. But I think overall, if towns and cities are dependent on staffing and response times, it's going to have to be, at some point the transition is going to be to paid staff. So.
And does that make sense too? I mean, given the amount, like now, it's probably more difficult to become a paramedic in 2019 than say it was in 1975 or something like that. So I mean, is it really an issue of people don't want to volunteer their time as much, or just really this is a very high level professional skill set that we need to be paying for?
Yeah. I think ultimately at the end of the day, you do get what you pay for. But it is, I mean, just to be a paramedic, you're essentially taking a year to a year and a half of your life and putting it on hold to get that training. And if you don't have that ability, if you need to work full time, which most people do, if you have a family life, if you have hobbies and things you enjoy to do, outside of your work, I still say that in today's society, how somebody can be a certified volunteer firefighter, EMT, and still have a home life and a career, it's hard to do. I mean, we average a 56-hour work week in Rockland for our employees, and we struggle to keep our training and our staffing up, and it's only based on time. I mean, at one point the city had a true dedicated regional response team for the hazmat team for the state of Maine. We were all trained to a certain level that a lot of other departments weren't, and we had to give that up because we couldn't keep up with the mandates and the training. So it's something that is only going to get worse, and I think it only affects us.
Yeah, there's always new rules and new things that you have to learn as we learn more things.
Exactly. Some tragedy will happen, and some mandatory training will come out of that, and that just adds to what we already have to do. So,
and we're seeing that in numerous careers, from like law enforcement and teachers and things of that nature. So.
Yep.
When you look at the town or the city of Rockland, what do you see as the primary hazards that maybe people don't realize that they have in their homes, or in terms of fire hazards?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're talking in-home emergencies or anything, we obviously, it seems basic, but fire detection, smoke detection, CO detection, things of that nature. We go into a lot of homes, and it still shocks me today that we see the lack of those protections in there. And again, when you're talking seconds will save lives, if smoke detectors aren't functional and aren't operational, that's where it's a basic coverage that everybody can do, and make sure that their property and their families are protected as best as you can. The city does have a fairly lenient in-home sprinkler ordinance that we've seen kind of a shift to, that people are willing to have these installed into their homes under certain instances, and I think as time goes on, that'll increase as well, and given 10, 20 years, it'll be the new norm. So I think overall, homes will be protected better. People will be protected better. So
is there a factor too that a lot of our buildings, like my house is 100 years old. A lot of people's houses are these old Victorians. You've got these old wooden, apartment buildings that I think we have had some problems with.
Yep. Yeah, no, definitely the what they call the modern technology for building has made buildings inherently more dangerous for civilians and for firefighters. You have burn times in newer homes that to some standards are 8 and 10 times quicker, that you're going to have a collapse or a serious structural issue versus a home that was built with what we call legacy building technology that keeps the ability for structures to stay up longer under direct flame impingement. So that's a huge thing.
So new buildings are actually worse than the old ones?
Absolutely, yeah. And it all comes down to the density of the wood that's used now. Back in the 50s, 40s, 30s, when you had a true 2x4, it was a 2x4. Now when you want a 2x4, they can build them and engineer them to stretch further spans. They're not a true 2x4, some are 1x3s. And when you put you introduce heat and flames onto those, they fail a lot quicker. Oh. And it definitely, it's cheaper to build. It's quicker to put something up like that. But we as firefighters and people inside homes are in a lot more danger when you do have a fire inside your home and don't have those protections in place.
So they don't build them like they used to.
They
basically
don't.
That's interesting. I wasn't expecting that answer.
Yeah, it's true everywhere. So yeah.
If you could change one thing in, that to make people safer, what would it be?
Come on. I mean, that's I got a dozen things that I would change, but I think when it comes down to it, if you have staffing in house and you have the right detection in place in your homes and your businesses, then at least when an emergency does happen, that's the best case scenario that you can ask for, is that trained people are going to show up and they're going to be there as soon as they can. And I think the city sees value in that. That's why we have our staffing levels. But I think overall, most fire and EMS agencies operate at a minimum. Nobody has too many people sitting in their fire stations, and everybody really operates at the minimum level. And I think the talk of regionalization is appealing to people, but I think it gives a false impression that it's going to save people money. It will save you money if you have an equal amount of the same entity that you can offload and save money there, but nobody is operating, and staff is the big picture, if you will, and nobody has enough staff. So.
And even before any regional new plan comes into place, there's already a lot of crossover and discussions with other departments. My understanding, I'm running into the same firefighters in Thomaston and South Thomaston and in Rockland often,
Yeah, we're all pulling from the same pool, and the pool is getting less and less all the time, and I think we've as fire and EMS agencies we augment and offset the lack of personnel with automatic responses. Right now if there's a fire in the city, Rockport automatically comes, Camden automatically comes. And I think we've done well to institute those changes and get people here as quick as we can. But it definitely, with Mid-Coast Maine, Southern Maine has a lot more departments that are full time, and they can pull from each other fairly quickly. Us, we're a little more regionally kind of detrimental, if you will, and having people there as quick as you can is what we strive to do, and I think we do it the best way we can.
Okay, great. Thanks for being here today, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
All right, and thank you for watching. If you visit our Knox and Waldo County VillageSoup sites, you can see all the video interviews that we do. Just go up to the button at the top that says Watch, scroll down to Behind the News, and you can see all the different videos. So check them out. If you've got anything you'd like to suggest for us, or any comments or concerns or questions, email us at news@villagesoup.com. Thanks a lot.